Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever wondered what it really means when you hear a country is developed? It's a word that gets thrown around all the time, but how do we actually measure something so big and, well, so complicated? All right, let's jump right in and unpack the numbers and ideas that are used to figure out how a nation is doing. It really all boils down to this one big question. Is it all about the money? Is it about how happy people are? Or maybe their health? How do you take this abstract idea and turn it into something you can actually compare, country to country? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore. So let's start with the official definition. At its very core, development is all about progress. And it's not just about a country's bank account. This part is absolutely crucial. It's about the quality of life for the people who live there. It's really the journey towards making life better for everybody. Okay, so let's start with that human side of the equation first. Before we even get into the money, how do we measure the actual well-being of millions of people? This is where something called social indicators come into play. Social indicators are basically statistics that give us a snapshot of what life is actually like in a country. Things like the death rate, how many people die per thousand each year. That alone can tell you so much about healthcare and safety. Or you can look at life expectancy, which is such a powerful number that kind of sums up a nation's overall health. And wow, this right here shows you what's often called the development gap. Just look at the difference. A life expectancy of 82 versus 58, that's an entire generation of life. Or think about it, having 45 doctors for every 10,000 people versus only 2. These aren't just numbers on a screen. They represent completely different worlds. All right, let's switch gears and move to the metric we're probably all most familiar with, money. How do we even begin to measure the financial power and productivity of an entire country? The big one you always hear about is GDP. The easiest way to think about it is like it's the total price tag for everything a country makes and does in a single year. It's a measure of the sheer size of that country's economy. So a bigger GDP usually means a bigger, more productive economy. Sounds simple, right? Well, not so fast. This is a really common mistake people make. I mean, a country could have a massive economy, but if it also has a massive population, all that wealth might be spread super thin. So how do we account for that? We use this incredibly simple but really powerful tool, per capita. It literally just means per person. By dividing a country's total economic output by the number of people who live there, we get an average. And that lets us make a much fairer comparison between a huge country and a tiny one. And check this out. This chart shows you exactly why per capita is such a game changer. Both of these countries have the exact same total national income, a whopping $2 trillion. But look, because country B has a much, much smaller population, the average income per person is 10 times higher. It's a totally different economic story for the average person living there. And just real quick, you'll often see GNI used instead of GDP. They're super similar, but GNI also includes money that a country's businesses and people earn from overseas. So sometimes it can give you a slightly more complete picture of a nation's total income. Okay, so we've got the people stuff on one side, the social indicators, and we've got the money stuff on the other, the economic ones. But what if we could smash them all together? What if there was a way to create a single, more complete score to see the bigger picture? Well, that's precisely what the Human Development Index, or HDI, tries to do. It's called a composite indicator, which is just a fancy way of saying it mixes a bunch of different ingredients, or different types of data, into one final powerful number. So what's in this recipe? The HDI is basically built on the 3 key areas we've just talked about. First, you've got health, and that's measured by life expectancy. Second is knowledge, measured by education levels. And third is the standard of living, which is measured by that GNI per capita we just discussed. It's the perfect blend of people and money. And the result of all that is a nice, simple score between 0 and 1. The closer a country gets to 1, the higher its level of human development is. It's actually a pretty clever way to get a quick, side-by-side snapshot of how countries are doing around the world. Now, this all sounds pretty great, right? A neat and tidy system. But and this is a really big but, we have to do a reality check. Because as useful as these numbers are, they are not perfect. They have some major limitations that we absolutely have to know about. This right here is the single biggest problem. An average can be so misleading.
A country might look great on paper with a high GNI per capita, but that number tells you absolutely nothing about whether that wealth is shared or if it's all in the hands of a few super rich people.
And this visualizes the problem perfectly. Let's say these two charts represent two different countries. The one on the left is pretty equal. The one on the right has massive inequality. But here's the crazy part. Both of these countries could have the exact same average income. The number's the same, but the reality for most of the people living there, completely different. This is how an average can totally hide the truth.
So to wrap up the main drawbacks, here's what to remember. First, averages can hide these giant gaps between the rich and the poor. And second, just gathering all this data is really, really hard. Think about it. In remote areas or in countries dealing with conflict, the numbers you get might not be totally accurate or even complete.
And that really brings us to the big takeaway here. All these things, GDP, HDI, life expectancy, they're incredibly powerful and we need them. They give us a vital starting point for understanding how countries compare. But they are not the full story. They're a simplified snapshot, not the complex, messy, beautiful reality of life itself.
So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. If one number is always going to be an oversimplification, what else are we missing? What about things like personal freedom or happiness or environmental quality? What other things should we be thinking about when we try to measure a nation's success? Thanks for joining me.